This is John Jackman's journal. He was a soldier with the 9th Kentucky Infantry. The Battle of Chickamauga just ended, September 21st, 1863. As soon as it was light enough to see how to ride, I started for the regiment. I found them lying around loose, in line of battle, waiting for orders. A skirmish line was soon after sent forward to find the enemy, but he had withdrawn during the night. The Army of Tennessee, for once, had beaten the enemy in an open field fight. General Bragg rode along the lines, and everywhere was loudly cheered. We tried to get tools to bury our boys, but could not. Late in the evening, I was sent with orders to the hospital and remained there all night. After I had left, the brigade started towards Chattanooga. A detail was left to bury the dead. September 22nd. Early Lieutenant Curd and myself followed up the regiment on horseback and found it bivouacking on the side of the road 4 or 5 miles from Chattanooga. Here we remained all night, September 23rd. In the forenoon, marched over Missionary Ridge and formed line of battle around Chattanooga. We thought an assault was going to be made, and seeing the forts bristling with cannon and the line of works blue with Federals, we had long faces. There were some shells thrown over us in the evening. At last, night drew her sable curtains round, and we lay down upon arms to sleep. Johnny Green and I having pulled up a pile of dry grass upon which we lay, covered alone by our overcoats, and slept well. September 24th. In the morning the division moved back to Missionary Ridge immediately in front of Chattanooga, and formed our line a short distance above the base and about 2 miles from town. Some shelling from the forts during the day, but generally quiet. About 11 o'clock at night, our skirmish line advanced and drove the outposts into the works, creating quite a fuss, but I don't believe a man was hurt on either side. September 25th. Moved a little during the day, but at night occupied about the same position we did in the morning. September 26th. Quiet all day, making reports and writing up my journal. September 27th. Being Sunday, Professor Pickett preached for the brigade. He is brigade chaplain. Both armies seem to be taking a blowing spell. No movements on either side, that I could see. September 28th. Went to the wagon train 7 miles to the rear and changed linen after taking a bath in the river of death. The ablution was quite necessary, for I had been in dirt for some time past. At noon, returned and saw a train of 160 ambulances coming out of Chattanooga under a flag of truce for the Federal wounded that had been left on the field. October 1st. Nothing of interest has taken place until today. A very interesting, cold, autumnal rain has been pouring down all day, and I have been crouched under a blanket, put up in the manner of a fly, all the dreary day. This has certainly been one of Bryant's melancholy days. October 2nd. Rather warm. The brigade is out at the wagon train, and we are cleaning up. Have been in the service 2 years today. October 3rd. In the evening, moved back to our old position on the bridge. October 4th. All quiet around the lines. For several days past, a truce has been kept up between the pickets, and we don't hear a gun. In the evening, moved our lines back up the hill a little and commenced throwing up works. Our corn, dodgers, and blue beef are sent to us daily, and in no great quantities. We have our tent up and pass the rainy days more comfortably than before. October 7th. Raining in the forenoon. In the evening, part of our line subject to a few shells thrown from the forts about Chattanooga. October 10th. All quiet until this morning, when we had reveille at 2, and the troops kept under arms, fearing an advance. Today, Jeff rode around the lines and was generally loudly cheered. when he and Bragg, with other general officers, passed our lines, our boys stood very respectfully on the works, but not a man opened his mouth. October 12th, wrote my first letter home to send by flag of truce via Richmond. October 13th, raining since yesterday evening. Have lately seen several late Louisville journals gotten on the skirmish line. It seems despondent. Looks to be very wet and muddy over in the United States. October 16th, cloudy and cool, Novemberish. I have forgotten the date, and it was of so little importance at the time I did not make any note of it, but it was about this time the fact was announced that Chattanooga was to be shelled from Lookout Mountain. That morning I clambered up to the top of the ridge to see the grand sight. The guns opened, little field pieces, and first we could see a little tuft of smoke rise out of the trees on the side of the mountain, then presently could hear the full report of the gun. Often the shells would fall short, and those that did go to the works did no harm. October 17th, day of sunshine. Great news from Virginia has been passing about today. Something about Lee's whipping Meade. It is also stated in official circles that Wheeler is on the rear of Rosecrans playing smash. October 20th, brigade moved back across the ridge 2 or 3 miles to the Chickamauga and have gone regularly into camp. The October winds are filling the air with withered leaves, and soon the trees will be stripped. To be in camp again makes one feel like he is at home. October 21st, this morning had a light shower of rain, and a very heavy rain has just passed over this evening. A few such rains will entirely strip the trees. A good deal of fuss among the boys about the proper ownership of cooking utensils, which have not been used only by details of late. Often the litigated property is brought up to the colonel's tent for a decision, and both parties invariably swear, or say they would be willing to swear on a stack of Bibles, as to the ownership of the doubtful property. At 3 p.m., while a heavy rain was pelting down, received orders to strike tents and march. We crossed the Chickamauga on a pontoon bridge and waded through a swamp 2 or 3 miles wide before we got to the solid road, when we marched for Tyner Station, which I have mentioned before, a distance of some 7 or 8 miles. The regiments got separated in the swamp, and night overtaking us, we got lost. At last, we came in sight of the campfires, built by a detail sent forward in the evening for the purpose, and soon our troubles were forgotten in slumber. October 22nd, sun rose in a cloudless sky, and the day has been beautiful throughout. Commenced fixing up camp October 23rd. Commenced raining this morning before daylight, and continued all day, and greater part of the night also had heavy thunder. October 24th. All last night the locomotives kept up a tooting over at the station. Longstreet's corps shipped towards Knoxville. Today has been cold and cloudy. Looks like snow. October 25th. Sunday, and passed by without my knowing it being the Sabbath. A day of sunshine. October 26th. Another day of pleasant weather. October 27th. Cloudy and sprinkling rain at times. Heavy firing of artillery at Chattanooga. Could not ascertain the cause. October 28th. Pretty day. Some cannonading at Chattanooga. October 29th. All quiet. October 30th. Raining at Reveille, and continued to pour down all day long. This weather is enough to give one the ennui. October 31st. Stopped raining last night. Has been clear all day, but a cool, disagreeable wind blowing. Regiment mustered for pay. Brother Will staying all night with me. November 1st. Sunday. Rode out 5 or 6 miles hunting black haws and persimmons. Nice day. November 8th. A cool north wind blowing. Being the Sabbath, Reverend Pickett preached this forenoon. Have been busy all the week, making out the different reports necessary to be made the first of each month. Had to work under difficulties. Rained all day Wednesday. Has been some cannonading at Chattanooga every day this week. November 9th. Clear, cold. Last night, ice formed 1/2 inch thick, first of season. November 10th. Froze ice again last night. Cobb's battery joined brigade from Missionary Ridge. Saturday the 5th, Kentucky joined the brigade in place of 41st Alabama, transferred. Our brigade is now composed entirely of Kentuckians. November 11th, Johnny Green and I commenced building us a house today, tearing down an old outhouse in the country for the purpose. All the boys are busy as beavers building cabins for winter. November 12th, again at work on house. Brother Will was to see me today. He has been wrongfully placed in Waters Battery, which has been for some time stationed about Chattanooga. He was traveling on the cars with a pass from one of Wheeler's staff, which he thought was good. But he was arrested and assigned to the battery as a dismounted cavalryman. Colonel Wycliffe today sent up a paper to Army headquarters, which will get him out of durance vile. November 13th, rode over to the ridge to see Brother Will. When I got on the top of the ridge, I could but notice the change autumn has wrought over the scenery. The trees are now all bare in the valley, and one can see all the movements of the troops with more ease. There is a large army in Chattanooga, grand scenery about, and I delayed for some time beholding it, then went down at the base of the ridge and saw Brother Will, the battery being encamped on a little rocky elevation out in the valley. November 14th. Raining a little in the morning. November 15th. Sun shining all day but cold wind blowing. No divine service, all the chaplains gone. November 19th. Pretty day. Some cannonading at Chattanooga. Have just completed our house. Weather has been beautiful the few days past. Yesterday, wrote to Jerry Leggett, 4th Kentucky Cavalry. There has been more or less cannonading Sunday. November 21st. Commenced raining last night and has kept up all day. Reading Burns by a good fire in our house. November 22nd. Brother Will to see us. Has not got off yet. A clear and pleasant day. I put the following letter in, as it gives an account of the movements of the brigade during the Battle of Missionary Ridge and retreat back to Dalton. The letter was printed in the Memphis Appeal, published at Atlanta, Georgia. My personal adventures were few. I saw a hard time. The night we got to the ridge, though late, thousands of campfires were sparkling in the valley beneath. A belt of fires encircled Chattanooga, showing the lines of the enemy, and all around the base of the ridge our fires were gleaming. We are permitted to publish the letter below, although a private one, from one friend to another, and not intended for the public eye. It will repay perusal, as it is well written and evinces none of the fright and panic generally supposed to have existed throughout our army in the unfortunate battles at Missionary Ridge, Camp 9th Regiment, Kentucky Volunteers, near Dalton, Georgia, December 2nd, 1863. We have had stirring times since you left, but taking all things into consideration have come off pretty well. You have, no doubt, been kept posted as to the general movements of this army by the newspapers. I have not seen one since we left Tyner Station, so I shall only attempt to give you a history of the part this regiment and brigade took in the late battle and retreat of the army. The day after you left, Monday, November 23rd, at 7:00 p.m., we broke up camp and marched for Missionary Ridge, where we arrived at midnight and stacked arms in line of battle, on top of the ridge, immediately above our old position. The following morning was cloudy and cold, and General Lewis moved the brigade into the ravine in rear of General Breckinridge's headquarters, where there were some vacated winter quarters. We were not permitted to enjoy these long, for we were again moved to the top of the hill about noon and formed in line, single file, a little to the left of the position we occupied in the morning. The brigade immediately commenced throwing up breastworks a little over the brow of the hill toward Chattanooga. It commenced raining at 12 p.m. and continued until nearly night, being very disagreeable. The enemy could not have selected a more favorable day for storming Lookout Mountain. The mist covered the greater part of it and sometimes obscured the valley beneath from view. The batteries on Moccasin Point and at the Star Fort kept up a furious shelling nearly all day, their fire being directed at Lookout. The firing of small arms was incessant during the day and long after night, when the flash of the guns seemed like myriads of fireflies on the mountainside. The next morning, 25, while the moon was in total eclipse, about 2 a.m., we moved to the right of General Bragg's headquarters, 2 miles, a little to the right of the tunnel on the Chattanooga and Cleveland Railroad, and at daylight formed in line. As a reserve to General Smith's brigade, Major General Cleburne's division. We were attached to this division until we reached this place. Soon afterward, the 9th was moved to the front and formed on the right of General Smith to fill up an interval between him and Liddell. Here we had to face the music without pits or breastworks. However, as the enemy did not advance upon us but once, and then only in single line, we easily held our position. We were on the side of one hill, and the enemy had to charge down one opposite. They advanced about 9 or 10 o'clock a.m. We were under fire about 20 minutes when the Yankees fell back. A great deal their fire was, I believe, directed at a Texas regiment on our left. That intended for us was mostly too high. There were only 3 men wounded in the regiment. Sergeant Young, Company D, through the left hip by Minnie ball, severely. Sergeant Caruth, color bearer, a Minnie ball grazed his neck and breast, bruising him badly. He left the field only a few minutes. H.C. Johnson, Company H, flesh wound through the left arm by Minnie ball. The enemy did not advance in our front anymore. The 9th was the only regiment in the brigade that was. When we stopped, Johnny Green and I made us a bed of brush and tried to sleep, having no other covering than our overcoats. We left all our blankets in wagons, but the night was too cold. First a mist commenced falling, then soon after turned into snow or hail. We had to nod around a fire all night. The next night a cold rain was pelting down, and while the boys were fortifying, I tried to get a little sleep by lying down close to a fire. I did sleep a moment, but burnt all the back out of my overcoat, or a big hole in it. Afterwards in the campaign, I often heard soldiers say, pointing me out, "Golly, didn't a shell come near getting that fellow? Look at the hole in his coat." The following morning, while going to the right, I saw Brother Will, who was still in the battery. I tried to get him to go with me, but he would not leave. I was standing immediately by Sergeant Young when he was shot, and I thought he was killed, as the ball knocked him clear off the ground and threw him several feet. When night came on, we all commenced piling up leaves and building good fires, well satisfied that all was well. But we had scarcely laid down before orders came for us to move. When we got back to Chickamauga Station, the whole army was there in a mess. I got a little sleep during the night between Colonel Wycliffe and Dr. Barron, who had blankets. The night we got to Ringgold, The boys had their choice to wade the stream about waist deep or go 2 miles farther by a bridge, and many went around by the bridge in preference to wading. Andy Cronin and myself bargained with a teamster who had a very small mule to take us over, for which we were to pay him $2 each. Andy is a very large man, and when we both got on the mule and pushed out into the river, he made demonstrations like he was going to his doom, and we had to use our heels with a vengeance to keep him from doing so. That morning, while we were in line near Chickamauga Station, I was on the skirmish line with Company D, and all the troops fell back unobserved by 4 or 5 of us, and we were surrounded before we knew it. We got out through by strategy and fast running. I thought for a time Camp Chase had won. I was worn out when we stopped at Tunnel Hill for the night. We had marched back and forth between Ringgold and Tunnel Hill 7 miles 2 or 3 times during the day, conforming our movements to Cleburne. After dark a rain set in and sleep was out of the question. When morning came, I did not feel very strong and turned my Enfield, picked up on the ridge, over to a gunless man. We had to stand in line of battle in a pelting rain until noon, when Cleburne passed us. Then we marched for Dalton on the railroad 6 or 7 miles. We stopped for the night in some old hospital buildings 1/2 mile from town on the railroad. That night, November 28th, I believe, was the most disagreeable night I ever spent. The houses were not very tight, and I could not sleep on the floor inside, so I went out by a fire and hovered around it all night long. I believe the keenest wind was blowing I ever felt. I had not slept any scarcely for 4 or 5 nights, and could hardly hold my eyes open, yet I knew if I went to sleep I would freeze. November 29th. We moved a short distance up into a ravine to camp. Our wagon still being away, we had to rough it. The night was again cold, and I got no sleep. November 30th. Today our wagons came up from Resaca. Johnny Green and I immediately fixed up our fly. We had no tent, by weatherboarding the back end and building a large fire in front. At night we had our blankets spread down on a bed of leaves and slept 40 miles an hour. December 2nd. At night, received a letter from home by flag of truce via City Point. Brother Will's battery was fortunately abandoned at the ridge, and now he is with us. This concludes the 9th part of the story. Thank you very much for listening. Please subscribe for more stories and leave a comment.